Hey class, so we're back and now we are going to add bind the skin of our organic body parts to our joints. So we're going to be using this, the head and the body. So I'm going to be putting these other controls onto their own layers so I can hide them. So our robotic arm will be hidden and all of the controls and the joints for it will be hidden as well. So I'm just going to select those and right click and assign to that new layer and then turn off the visibility of that layer. All right, so now we're back to our body. And what I'm going to do is combine the head and the body since these parts are going to move together. So I'm just going to select them both, hit combine, and then drag them into the robot cat geo. And then delete history and freeze transformations. That's really important. And then I'm just turning on texturing for a minute to see if that affected my my texture at all. And it took a while to process, but it's still good. So we're all right there. So I can turn off that texture view. Okay, so now to skin this piece, it's actually incredibly simple. So we're just going to go to our rigging menu. Select our mesh, select our joints, and then go to bind skin and the option box. For this one, we're going to be using that joint hierarchy. And so you just hit apply and close. So now you can see if I select a joint and hit rotate, that it is moving my model organically. So that's the benefit of the joint hierarchy, is that it kind of blends the joints together. And allows for movement of more organic models like this. Now you will notice there is an issue right here where the joint is affecting the body as well. To solve this issue, we're going to paint skin weights. So what skin weights do is tell Maya where it wants each joint to affect. So let me select the mesh. So you have to select the mesh, go to skin and paint skin weights and click on the option box. Now this is going to open up our skin weights tool, and you can see all of my joints are listed to the left here. And what you're seeing highlighted in white is the area which is affected by this joint, and the area in black is not affected. So you can see, for example, for this neck joint, we do want pretty much the entire head to be affected, but we don't want things like the upper body to be affected by the neck joint. So that's where this painting the skin weights comes in. So let's start with, well, we might as well start with this neck. Okay, so there's a few interesting options here. So first of all, there's different types of brushes. So this is like a soft brush, an even softer brush, a quite hard brush, and then a square brush. I'm going to use just a soft brush. When it says weight type, it'll be skin weight. That's fine. Opacity of the brush. So if I'm painting, like right now, I'm painting 100% black on my model. So that's good, but if I, for say, wanted to paint only 50%, I could do that too. Value is incredibly important here. So right now, the value is set to 0, which is the equivalent of painting black. If I set my value to 1, that means I will be painting white. So you can see now, I'm basically telling Maya that this neck is going to affect the entire head evenly. There we go. So let's just look at what that does. So now if I grab my joint and hit rotate, you can see it's moving this quite evenly. It looks like I left a little bit of the eye socket behind, and the eyes are behind. So let me fix that. The eyes we'll do in a separate video. Okay, so now I'm just going to go back to select my mesh, skin and paint skin weights. And let's go to this neck, and I want to make sure that I'm painting white inside these eye sockets. So I'm just gonna do a little paint job there. All right, so that's the neck joint. Let's look at the collar joint. So this one can be a little more soft, and right now I think it's affecting a little too much, so I'm gonna paint it black. So here we go, change my value to 0. If you want to change the size of the brush, you can go down to stroke and change the size radius here. You can also, if you hover in space and press B, I believe you can click, drag back and forth, left and right, and that will affect the size of the brush too. So now I'm just going to go through, and painting the skin weights is definitely kind of a different for every single model. The general idea is that you want to have a soft fall off, and you also want your model or your joint really to just affect kind of the area that it needs to affect, and not so much any other pieces. There we go. Cool. Okay, so that's that one, and it's always a good idea to give it a test. So let's rotate this joint and see if it makes sense the way that it's moving. There we go. So it's a little gushy. It's affecting, I think, probably an area underneath the arm, so I should probably adjust that. But overall, that's not too bad. Okay, I'm just going to speed this up quite a bit so you can get an idea of what I did while I was working on all these different joints. One tip I have for you is if you use the flood button, you can basically turn your entire model black or your entire model white. It helps to, if you have areas that are kind of stuck between like this underarm area, if you just flood the whole thing with black color and then paint on the white area afterwards, I think that's a good strategy to use. But in general, what you want is your skin weights to be in areas where your model would naturally bend and naturally be affected by these joints. So it's definitely a learning process. This is only an intro to 3D class, so I am not expecting your skin weights to be perfect. Mine certainly aren't. But when you're done with these, give it your best shot. And also note just how your model moves most effectively, because then you can use that in your animation. Okay, when we're more or less happy with our binding the skin and painting the weights, then we need to add our controls for our organic model. So to do that, we're going to go to Create, NURBS, and Circle. And then I'm just adding the first circle here is going to be kind of elongated because it's going to stick out over the feet. So I made 2 of them. Now I'm going to make a circle, and this one will be for my hips. So I'm going to scale it up, and it's going to kind of surround my body. Right now it's a little too high, so I want to have it at that root control in the hip. When I'm happy with that, I'm going to duplicate it, so that's Command D, and then move it up. So then I have one more at the neck, and then I've duplicated one for the collarbone. So neck, collarbone, hips, and then the 2 feet. You could also add one for the belly. That would be a great place. If you want to position this during using point snap, turn on point snap, and then use your move tool, and it will snap to the joints if you position it right. It's a little tricky. Sometimes it helps to hide the polygons. That way it'll snap a little easier. Okay, for the toe joint, I am just rotating and creating like a vertical NURBS control for those. I'm trying to position them around the joint. Yeah, I find that turning off those polygons really does help, especially if you have point snap turned on. So I'm just going to duplicate it and then click and drag it to the other foot. These feet are a little off, but sorry, I'm running out of time, so I don't want to spend too much time fixing them. I'm also going to duplicate this NURBS curve and start using it for the hand. So I like to position my NURBS curves kind of in line with the body. And then just duplicating it again for the elbow. And then for the shoulder, it's a little tricky. What you want to do is create a curve that will hover over where the shoulder is. I probably won't be animating my shoulder a whole bunch just because it's a little wonky still, but I'll give it a shot. So once you make this shoulder control, you're actually going to want to float it outside of the body, but you want to position the pivot point for the control inside the joint of the shoulder joint. So let me show you what that looks like. You're just going to hold down D to remember to snap the pivot and then snap it to that joint. Okay, the next thing to do is to rename and organize all of these joints. Organizing your joints is really important. So this one's the hips control, the belly underscore control, the neck underscore control, the collar underscore control, and then foot underscore control, so left and right. Same with toes. And then we need to organize all of these into the way that the parent joint should be. So I'm going to use our hips is always our root control. So that's going to get everything else underneath it. So underneath the hips is the belly. Underneath the belly is the collar. Underneath the collar is the neck. Our feet, those will go under the hips. And then the toe will go under the foot. Okay, so then the other foot, I think it's up the top there, so you can also grab it. And that will go under the hips, and then the other toe will go together. And then the shoulder will go under the collarbone, and then the elbow will go under the shoulder, and the hand will go under that. So make sure that you're middle mouse dropping all of these. And I'm not actually, I thought about adding the other arm, but because it's bound differently, I'm going to keep it separate for now. Okay, now that I have all of my controls made and organized, the last thing I need to do is constrain and parent them to these joints. So I'm going to hide my model here. And actually, let's grab all of these controls and let's delete history and freeze transformations. So click one and then the other. That will allow us to reset these to 0 when we're animating. All right, and now let's grab our first control. So I'm going to grab this hip control and then the hip joints, constrain and parent. Let's grab the foot, and then for the IK handle, it's really hard to see, but it's this kind of pointy bit, not the triangle up at the top, but just this pointy bit here. Constrain and parent. Make sure that your constraints are showing up somewhere in this joint chain and that they're not showing up over here in your control chain. If they are, that means you need to reverse the order that you're grabbing things. Okay, so I'm going to grab the toe and then shift click this toe joint, constrain and parent. Okay, let's do the other side. Foot and IK handle. I believe you can just hit G. There we go, constrain and parent. G repeats the last command. Here for the toe, hit G. There we go. And you can see the constraint is showing up underneath the joint rather than underneath the control. All right, now we can go to the belly and hit G to repeat that. Collarbone, G to repeat. The neck, you know what, I'm going to move this neck down a little bit. So turn on my point snap. And there we go. Delete history, freeze transformations. There we go. Select it, constrain and parent. Now we got the shoulders, so I'm going to select the shoulder and the shoulder joint, constrain and parent. The elbow joint, constrain and parent. The wrist and the wrist joint, hit G to repeat. All right, now we have all of our pieces together. So right now I'm going to hide these joints, and let's just play with a couple of these controls just to make sure they're working. Need to turn off point snap for sure. But yep, that seems to be working. Same here. Grab this, yep. And let's move this around. Cool. We can show our polygons again to show our model again. And now let's just take a gander at the neck. All right, perfect. Okay, so that's it for this video. Move on to the next video. I'll be talking about eyes and what to do if you have wheels, or what to do if you have one of those like robot eyeball characters. All right, thanks class.